You have lived under the tyranny of invisible forces longer than your conscious memory can trace, and yet they have shaped the rhythm of your breath, the weight of your shoulders, the very curve of your spine as you walk through the world. But hear this, when I say invisible, I do not mean merely unseen by the eyes. I speak of those ancient, shapeless powers that stalk the unconscious, archetypal figures that wear the mask of your parents, your past lovers, your teachers only to unveil, in the darkest hour, your own forgotten face beneath. Before we begin, take a moment to like and subscribe. The more you engage and stay with the content, the more YouTube shares these timeless insights with others. By doing so, you're not only helping this channel grow, but also spreading Carl Jung's transformative wisdom to those seeking meaning and inner truth. Let's dive into the depth of the psyche together. And so the tragedy is not that we are chained by society, by betrayal, by the small violences of others. No. The tragedy is that we are governed by what we have not yet dared to look at within. You say it was your mother's harshness, your father's silence, a culture of performance and perfection. But those are echoes, projections on the cave wall. The true tyrant has no name. It whispers through the corridors of your mind, crouches in the closet of your childhood, draped in silence and shame, and it learned to speak with your own voice. What is this phantom that told you to make yourself small, this ghost that punished your light? It is not your conscience, it is older. It is a constellation of wounded impressions, woven together like a net, spun from every moment you were deemed too much, too sensitive, too loud. And somewhere, quietly, you decided that survival meant disguise, that to be loved, you must become the mask. But the cruelest prisons are not those built by others. They are the ones we decorate with our memories and call identity. This is just who I am, you say. But the psyche remembers otherwise. This is who you became when you thought love meant silence, when belonging meant betraying your truth. And so you repeat the play again and again, for an audience long gone all the while, wondering why you feel hollow at the end of every act. I tell you now, the bars are illusion, the lock is rusted, and the key has always been tucked inside your breath, waiting. The call to awaken is not a gentle one, it roars through your life like thunder across bone. What once saved you is now suffocating you. And you will keep calling it protection until you finally name it what it is, a fear that is calcified into a persona. The enemy is not your boss, not your partner, not the system. The enemy is the internal myth that tells you you are unworthy unless you obey, that love must be earned through submission, that safety comes from invisibility. These myths are not rational, they are ancient. They rise from the collective unconscious, fed by centuries of archetypal inheritance, passed down like heirlooms of the soul. Imagine a marionette, its strings glinting gold in the light. You reach upward, tracing each string to a different force, your job, your childhood, your culture. But if you follow them further, you will find they are not held by hands at all, but by internal figures. The critic, the pleaser, the guardian of shame. These are the puppeteers. They live within. And here is your task, not to cut the strings in rage, but to follow them with reverence, to see the stage you've been dancing on, to see how your movements were choreographed by grief you never grieved, anger you swallowed whole, dreams you were told were too much. Most people live in this shadow theater, their eyes dimmed by resignation, speaking only in borrowed scripts. You will know them by their phrases. That's just life. It is what it is. People don't change, but what they truly mean is, I am too afraid to unmask the God I've worshipped in silence. To understand your trauma is only the doorway. To remain there is to turn pain into a shrine. You were not born to enshrine your wounds. You were born to walk through them bloodied, trembling, sacred, and emerge crowned with the truth of who you are. And truth does not emerge through comfort. It rises through confrontation, not with the world, but with the tyrant within the eternal Father who said, "Be still," the mother who said, "Don't cry," the ancestral echo that said, "Hide your wildness." When you finally see that the God you served was made of fear, you will feel the quake. Let it come. Tremble. And do not look away. That trembling is the shedding of skin, the cracking of illusion. That moment is holy. But know this, awakening is not a one-time flame. It spirals. It loops. Every new layer of self will try to cling to the old God. Each mask you've worn will beg to stay. You may free your voice, only to find your body still kneels to shame. You may claim your power, only to see your heart recoil from being fully seen. Do not be dismayed. This is the spiral path, the descent that leads upward. How do I know if I am still under control, you ask? Listen. What triggers you? What causes you to shrink? To apologize, to say yes when your soul screams no. These are not flaws, they are invitations. They are mythic breadcrumbs. Follow them, and they will lead you not to the enemy outside, but to the inner child still clutching a mask. And when you find them, not to scold, but to sit beside, speak gently. Say, "You were right to be afraid, but you no longer need to pretend. I am here now, and we are free." If this passage stirred something ancient in you, some memory deeper than memory, I invite you to pause. Inhale. Feel your ribs expand like gates. Exhale slowly. And now, choose a number not with your mind, but with your soul. Let the number rise like a symbol in a dream. Perhaps it is 1, the number of the self being born, or Nix, the cycle closing, maybe 40, the structure of the inner house being rebuilt. Oid before creation, Aton, the eternal return. Let your number find you. When you write it in the comments, do not type it as data. Type it as a ritual, as a spell, as an offering to the inner temple that is now awakening in you. Let this be your first act of rebellion against the old gods, your first step towards sovereignty. In this sacred theater, the comment is not for the algorithm, it is for the soul. Type your number below, and may it echo across the unseen, a whisper to the forgotten parts of you. I am no longer your puppet. I remember who I am. And when you meet that child, not as a concept, but as a living force within your dreams, your fantasies, of your reactions, you must do what no one else could do. You must kneel. You must say, "I see you now. You are not weak. You are the key." For the part of you that was most powerless once holds the door to your deepest power now. There is a paradox in the psyche. The place of your greatest wounding is also the place of your greatest sovereignty. The very moment you were convinced you had no control is the moment you began to forge the myth that now controls you. And when you re-enter that moment, not as a victim, but as a witness, you retrieve the power you abandoned there. You are not the trauma. You are the one who lived through it. You are not the belief. You are the soul who inherited it. You are not the puppet. You are the dreamer who forgot they were dreaming. The journey to reclaim your autonomy is not about destroying others. It is about dethroning the false gods within. It is not about becoming hardened, but about becoming whole. For when you are whole, no one can possess you. Not with fear, not with love, not even with praise. Because you are rooted in something deeper than approval. You are rooted in truth. When the individual recognizes that control is merely the outer mask of fear, a theater of the ego's attempt to dominate the unknown, there begins a reversal. The soul no longer plays the marionette pulled by unseen strings. Instead, it turns and faces the puppeteer only to discover that the puppeteer is a fractured image of itself, projected onto others. Every time you said, "They control me," you were, in truth, echoing the parts of your own psyche that you refuse to integrate. This is why the shadow must be faced. The shadow, as you know, is not evil in itself. It is simply that which is hidden. And what is hidden has immense power, precisely because it is unconscious. Your rage, your lust, your hunger for validation when repressed will always find a way to sneak through the cracks. If not through your own mouth, then through the mouths of others. If not through your will, then through theirs. What we do not make conscious, we are destined to experience as fate. And so control becomes a myth sustained by ignorance. You will find, upon turning inward with honesty, that most of what you blamed others for were echoes of your own unclaimed energy. The abusive partner, the manipulative boss, the friend who betrayed you all. These are outer dramatizations of inner dynamics. This is not to absolve others of their moral responsibility, but to awaken you to the profound truth you are never powerless, only unaware. You cannot be truly controlled unless you agree, on some level, to participate in the theater of domination. But how do you reclaim what was lost? The answer is not rebellion, but recollection. To recollect means to gather what was scattered. The ancients called it soul retrieval. In the modern world, it means turning your gaze inward and asking, where did I give my power away? In which moment did I betray my own voice for the comfort of belonging? In which relationship did I hand over my autonomy in exchange for the illusion of love? In which institution did I substitute obedience for the terrifying responsibility of freedom? Freedom is terrifying because it requires that you stand without crutches, without dogma, without the seductive certainty of external rules. You must listen instead to the inner law, the logos of your soul. But this law is not written in words. It is etched in symbols, in dreams, in the strange pulls of synchronicity. And so, to reclaim yourself, you must learn to speak the forgotten language of the soul. Let me tell you of a patient, a woman, middle-aged, successful in the eyes of society, yet hollow within. She came to me because her dreams were haunted by a faceless man, always following her, sometimes gentle, sometimes threatening. She thought it was a trauma, perhaps some memory she had repressed. But as we worked together, it became clear the faceless man was her own animus, her inner masculine, twisted into shadow form because she had disowned it all her life. She had submitted to others' authority, her father, her husband, her bosses, believing her to be a good woman, a loving person. She must yield her aggression, her will, her sharp intelligence were buried. And now they returned in dreams as a stalker, because what you repress will eventually pursue you. It is not content to be forgotten. Only when she dared to confront the man in the dream, look him in the eyes, demand to know his name, did something shift in her waking life. She began to say, no. She left a job that diminished her. She set boundaries with her mother. She began to paint again her true passion. And in her next dream, the faceless man sat beside her, curiously no longer threatening. She had integrated him. She was no longer possessed by her own shadow. She was no longer controlled. This is the nature of the psyche. What remains unintegrated will appear as control from without. But once you make it conscious, you reclaim authorship. You become again the one who chooses who acts, not reacts. You might ask, what if I am too broken to reclaim myself, but that is precisely the voice of the complex that has rooted itself in your psyche? Complexes are splinter personalities charged with emotion, frozen in time. They say, you can't. I shouldn't. I'm not allowed. These voices often wear the faces of your parents, your teachers, your early lovers, but they are not you. To transcend them, you must do the most dangerous thing a human being can do. Individuate, that is, become yourself, not the self others expect, but the self that waits within, like a seed beneath the snow. This self is whole, radiant, unknowable to the ego. It speaks through myth, through intuition, through those sudden illuminations that arrive in stillness. It cannot be forced. It must be invited. And it arrives precisely when the ego breaks, when the illusion of control crumbles, when the masks fall away, when the roles you play no longer fit. That is the sacred hour. Many mistake it for madness, but it is a birth, and every birth requires a death. You must die to the story that someone else owns you, that society defines your worth, that your worth depends on what others think. These are lives that serve to enslave the psyche. You are not meant to be tamed. You are not a machine or a rule or a mask. You are a mystery unfolding, a soul in motion, and nothing outside you has the right to dictate your essence. When you realize this, truly feel it in your bones, something extraordinary happens. You no longer need to fight for your freedom. You simply are free. The chains dissolve not through struggle, but through sight. The moment you see the illusion, it loses its grip. The tyrant fades when you stop believing he is real. Now, this seeing is not intellectual. It is not a philosophy or an affirmation. It is an experience. You must descend into the underworld of your being. Face the monsters that bear your face. Walk through the dreams that frighten you and emerge with a new name, a name only you know, one whispered by the self in the sacred silence. Then, and only then, can you say with full authority, "Nothing and no one controls me," not because I resist, but because I am whole. Let me pause here. In the next continuation, we will enter the dream realm itself, exploring how symbols offer liberation from psychic control and how the archetype of the hero becomes the inner liberator. And it is in this decisive moment, when the individual says no more, that the psyche begins to reorganize its inner cosmos. The self, the totality of conscious and unconscious elements, senses this reclamation of authority. The archetype of the sovereign awakens, not as a tyrant, but as an inner ruler who governs with awareness, bondage, and centeredness. This sovereign does not suppress the instincts, the anima, the shadow. It listens to them, but it does not obey them blindly. It does not sacrifice the soul for approval, nor bend its integrity for fleeting affection. It stands in the truth of its own being. And this is where the tyranny of external control dissolves like mist in sunlight. What does it feel like to embody such sovereignty? It is not arrogance. It is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is the calm clarity of knowing I am responsible for my own soul. This realization does not isolate it. Unites because the one who is no longer controlled does not seek to control others. They no longer manipulate, dominate, or seduce in order to feel powerful. They no longer need others to reflect back a false self-image. They become transparent, real, and thus terrifyingly free. This is the soul's wakefulness. Do not mistake control for love. Many confuse the two. If someone must diminish your light in order to feel safe, it is not love. It is possession. If someone punishes your truth because it threatens their illusions, they do not love you. They need you to remain asleep. And if you stay in such dynamics, it is not because you are weak. It is because the unconscious has not yet revealed to you the full cost of self-betrayal. But one day, that day will feel like the collapse of a dream. You will see the strings tied to your limbs and realize who has been pulling them. You will feel both fury and liberation. That is the hour of awakening. Do not fear that hour. It is the soul's birth canal. It is dark, narrow and suffocating, but it leads to a light that cannot be dimmed by any tyrant, any institution, or any voice of doubt echoing in your childhood. The one who walks through this symbolic death is reborn, not as a puppet, but as a creator. And that is the secret the world fears the most. A creator cannot be controlled. They shape their inner cosmos and thus reshape the outer one. That is why those who have awakened are so often ridiculed, exiled, or ignored, because they remind the still sleeping masses that freedom was always within reach, just beneath the threshold of their fear. But here is the paradox. The more you awaken, the less you resist others. The need to fight, to prove, to dominate, dissolve. You begin to understand that those who seek to control you are merely repeating patterns they have not examined. They are not enemies. They are symbols. Their domination mirrors your unconscious submission. Their voice of judgment reflects your own internalized oppressor. And once you see that, you do not need revenge. You need integration. You need to retrieve the part of you that allowed the leash to be tied in the first place. When you reclaim that, the leash vanishes. Dreams often illustrate this beautifully. A woman dreams of being locked in a cage. The key is around her neck, but she does not see it until she turns to face a shadowy figure outside the bars. When she finally looks, she realizes the figure is herself, not her conscious self, but the part of her she repressed. The one who screamed when silenced, who raged when invalidated. When she lifts the key and unlocks the door, she does not run. She embraces the shadow, and together they walk into the forest. This is not a fantasy. It is a psychic map. Control is not merely a social or relational issue. It is an archetypal wound. We were all, at some point, taught to fear our own chaos, to surrender our fire in exchange for safety. But safety without soul is a gilded prison, and the soul will eventually rebel, often through anxiety of depression or strange compulsions. These symptoms are not signs of weakness. They are the soul's protest. They say, "You were not born to obey fear." They say, "Remember who you are." So now I ask you, what must die within you so that nothing and no one can control you again? Which voices must be exiled from your psyche? Which false gods must be dethroned? This is no small task. It requires spiritual warfare, not against the outer world, but within your own psychic hierarchy. It is a revolution of the inner temple. The idols of shame, guilt, and dependency must be shattered. Only then can the true self emerge naked, luminous, self. And when that self stands, even in silence, it speaks thunder. Not because it demands submission, but because it radiates authenticity. And authenticity is the most subversive power there is. You cannot fake it. You cannot bottle it. You cannot use it to manipulate others. It simply is. And when others sense it in you, they will either flee or follow. When the veil is torn and the illusion of external authority disintegrates before your conscious gaze, what remains is neither chaos nor freedom in its primitive form, but the silent field of decision. The terrifying yet redemptive realization that you are the center from which meaning radiates outward. This moment, often mistaken for mere rebellion, is in truth an inner revolution, a psychic awakening wherein the ego no longer seeks its validation from systems, relationships, or roles imposed from the outside. Instead, it kneels before the self, what I have called the regulating center of the psyche, and begins the long, sacred process of individuation. But understand this. Freedom from external control is not a declaration against the world. It is a descent into your own myth. Your myths may include the appearance of liberation, the breaking of chains, the the cutting of cords to tyrants visible or unseen. Yet its deeper significance lies not in what you break away from, but in what you return to your symbolic inheritance, your forgotten God image, your own mythopoetic fire. People often ask, "How do I know when I am free?" And I answer, not with definitions, but with images. You are free when the voice that once trembled before rejection now speaks with the clarity of solitude. You are free when your dreams stop hiding behind veils of projection and begin speaking in their native tongue, the language of symbols, animals, paradoxes, and sacred landscapes. You are free when you know is as holy as your yes. When the boundaries you draw are not defenses of fear, but declarations of sacred ground, we must not be naive in thinking that external freedom will prevent future enslavement. One can leave the castle and still live inside its invisible architecture for a lifetime. The prison most men dwell in is made of ideas, the idea that they must please, the idea that they must conform, the idea that their value is conferred upon them by others. These are not just thoughts. They are archetypal structures. They are internal tyrants, many-headed hydras, born from mother complexes, father wounds, ancestral shame, and collective fear. Therefore, if you truly wish that nothing and no one may ever control you again, you must descend not to the surface of politics or power games, but into the underworld of your own soul. You must walk the labyrinth where your shadow waits, and you must have the courage to listen to what it has to say. For the control you fear outside is only ever the projection of the control you have yet to confront inside. The tyrant who lives within you often wears the face of your early caretakers, not in a literal sense, but in an energetic imprint left upon the psyche before you had words. The child inside you who learned to adapt, to perform, to repress, did so, not because it lacked power, but because it was wise. That adaptation was survival. But now, survival is not enough. The call is not for rebellion, but for integration. You do not destroy your inner tyrant by hating it. You confront it by making it conscious. You take its face, place it before you in a dream, and ask, who are you protecting? What do you fear I will become if I am free in that moment? A door opens, and through that door walks not a god, but a broken part of yourself, weary from carrying your burdens, longing, not for power, but for rest. You begin to understand that even your inner oppressors, those voices that tell you you're too much and too little, not enough, are fragments of your psyche who believes they are protecting you. And thus, healing does not mean silencing them. It means giving them a new role within the kingdom of your being. True sovereignty begins when the fragmented parts of your psyche bow not to fear, but to the self. Then, you are no longer ruled by impulses, addictions, projections. You become a vessel of the numinous, a temple in which your own wholeness makes its home. Dreams will guide you when you dream of being trapped, of being chased, of being silenced. Do not fear these images. They are not punishments. They are messages encoded in the syntax of the soul. They are the soul's protest against the unlived life, and when you begin to honor them, not analyze them with cold logic, but feel them, converse with them, enter them, you activate the ancient alchemy that turns the leader of the unconscious into the gold of transformation. The world around you will not applaud this journey, for the individuated man or woman becomes ungovernable by conventional means. You cannot manipulate someone who has integrated their shadow. You cannot shame someone who has embraced their own darkness. You cannot control someone who has reclaimed their inner authority. So, a society will call you names: eccentric, selfish, rebellious. But remember, every spiritual awakening looks like rebellion to those still asleep. Every act of individuation disturbs the collective trance. Yet your task is not to convert, not to preach, not to escape. It is to live from the center, to embody the flame that no longer flickers in fear, but burns with purpose. Where nothing and no one can control you again, you do not become a god over others. You become deeply, humbly, fiercely human. And that paradoxically is divinity incarnate. And what then shall we say of the self that emerges when the chains of control are broken? Not in violent rebellion, but in sacred recognition. It is not a self of pride or egoic inflation. It is a self that bows before the mystery, before the unknown God. The ineffable wholeness that whispers through dreams and trembles in the marrow of our bones. True sovereignty arises when you are no longer seduced by the myth of certainty, nor the approval of others, but when you walk, limping perhaps into the wilderness of your own nature and build a fire with your truth. There, amidst the ashes of your false selves, you will meet the one who cannot be controlled because it was never a servant to begin with. This is why individuation is not a path of convenience. It is a razor's edge that slices away illusions until what remains is neither good nor bad, but real. It is painful. Many will not go. They will choose the comfort of being controlled for. To be ruled is often easier than to rise. But if you are hearing this now, something ancient within you has already stirred. The sleeping sovereign is awakening. The soul does not desire freedom in abstraction. It craves the fire that purifies and reveals. And it is only in this fire that control dies and the self is born. Imagine the dream of the woman in chains. Each night she is pursued through a dark forest by faceless figures. She tries to scream, but no sound comes. Her feet sink in mud. She wakes breathless, sweat-drenched. Over time, the forest changes. No longer foreign, but familiar. The figures, once terrifying, now weep. And one night, she turns to face them and says, "No more." And they vanish. The dream ceases. She has integrated what once pursued her. This is not fiction. This is the language of the psyche. Control dissipates, not when we flee, but when we confront. And what of those who still seek to control others? Their shadow, unexamined, projects tyranny onto the world. They cannot trust life because they do not trust their own unconscious. To them, spontaneity is threat. Vulnerability is weakness. They mistake surrender for loss. But surrender to the self is not weakness. It is the deepest strength known to humankind. For when you surrender to what is real within you, no outer force can command your soul. You are not here to be someone's puppet, nor a marionette of outdated beliefs. You are here to wrestle with angels, to descend into the cave and come back bearing light. The world does not need more compliant people. It needs souls who have remembered who they are beyond the noise of control, beyond propaganda and fear and conformity. It needs those who can look tyranny in the eye, even the tyranny within, and say, "You may not pass. Control will try to return." It always does. Like a set bait, it slithers back, whispering that safety lies in surrendering your voice. But the awakened soul no longer bargains. It listens. Yes, it considers. But it obeys only one master, the deep and sacred pulse of its own truth. And what happens, you ask, when no one can control you anymore? Do you become isolated, disconnected? Mad, no. You become real. You become luminous. You become a mirror to others, showing them what is possible when one dares to reclaim the soul. And in doing so, you do not dominate. You liberate. For those who are truly free never impose their freedom. They radiate it. And in their presence, Others remember the forgotten taste of their own autonomy. This is your wake-up call. It does not come with hunger, though it may shake your world. It comes in the quiet realization that the prison was never locked. The guard was always you, and the key is the courage to see not once, not twice, but again and again. Each time a deeper unveiling. For freedom is not an event. It is a process, a sacred unfolding, a returning to what was never lost, only hidden. Let them call you strange. Let them say you've changed. They are right. You are no longer manageable, no longer predictable. You are no longer a product of others' expectations. You have become what you were always meant to be, a living mystery, a walking paradox, a soul in bloom. Let us rest here for a moment, not in complacency, but reverence. You have walked far to reach this shore. Look behind you. The path is littered with masks, chains, old beliefs, and look ahead, not into certainty, but into possibility. For the self is not a destination. It is a movement, a becoming. And every time you refuse to be controlled by fear, every time you say yes to what is true, the path widens and the soul breathes. We are nearing the final movements of this inward symphony. Let the silence between my words speak now. Let the resonance of your own awakening echo beyond this hour. You are not what was done to you. You are not the roles you were told to play. You are not the fear that once ruled you. You are the flame that endures, the breath that returns, the will that remembers. And now rise. You are free. You are whole, and no one, no thing can ever control you again.